This is your fortnightly instalment where I interview a trailblazing physiotherapist that has shaped the profession we are today. In celebrating their journey, knowledge and insights, you gain the opportunity to plan and guide your own professional journey. My name is Doug Carey and welcome to Physio+10. Welcome new and previous listeners of Physio+10. Thanks for joining us again. Our special guest for today's podcast is Peter Dornan. And I wanted to say from the outset that Peter has been a clinician for over 50 years, and that deserves a koala stamp, as Philip Adams would say. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much, Doug. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Hey, look, we start these podcasts off to get a bit of a background. So would you mind just giving us a bit of an outline of what you did as far as your early schooling and where you grew up?
I actually grew up on a peanut and dairy farm out in the South Burnett area, which is about 300 miles west of Brisbane. And it was a very nice childhood because only about 20, 30 kids in the school, very secluded, very safe. But then my father sent me to boarding school to have my education broadened. So I went to what was called Brisbane Boys College. It was a GPS school, and that I stayed there boarding for 4 years, and that just broadened my breadth of knowledge of who I was in the world. At that stage, I am a fifth generation farmer, and my expectation was to do no more than to become a farmer. But then, with about 2 weeks to go, Dad sold the farm, so that set me up on a bit of a wild path. I didn't quite know what to do with myself. He came to Brisbane, so I searched around for a job. So I guess in the early days, I had a really nice childhood, raised on a farm, and had a good education.
With regards to that, I mean, literally pulling the rug out from under your feet, did you know that was coming, or that was just completely out of the blue for you?
Completely out of the blue. Dad, I think Mum really, she had both the boys boarding, and I think she just was getting lonely out there, and she could see us maybe being tempted to stay in Brisbane. And she'd had enough of the farm life anyway, so I think Dad sold the farm for that reason. Also, he was getting on a bit, and I think it's a tough life on the farm. So I think it just suited them both to sell up and come to Brisbane.
Yeah.
So,
go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, so I really had to change my whole attitude and whole way of thinking. So I got several odd jobs, but eventually I got a really good job in the public service. Which in that generation, my parents loved me to get public service, banks or insurance companies. That was what they wanted, something nice and stable with no worries after the war years. And so I got a job in repatriation department, which is Department of Defence. And I treated diggers, looked after them as a clerk, and it really introduced me to a whole new world of business, letter writing and looking after people. But the important thing is I spent time at Greenslopes Hospital and became an admissions clerk there. And at the time, and so I got to know men very well with their injuries and could relate to what they had wrong with them. But mostly I got to know the doctors well. And one doctor invited me to, if I'd like to go and watch him do surgery. I said, that'd be amazing. So I watched him do a 5-hour gastrectomy. And I was sold on medicine. As it turned out, I wasn't a great student at school because I didn't need mathematics to become a farmer. And so I couldn't do medicine, but I could see the physios working, and I thought that was a nice alternative. So I would turn around after 3 years in the public service, which was a good chance for me to sow wild oats anyway in 3 gap years. And then I went to university.
So I'm guessing that around about this age, you're in your early 20s, 21, 22?
I was 21, yeah. And which was a good age for me. I had a bit of maturity about me because all the girls, if you could say them girls, all the young ladies in my class, and there were 35 in my class, were all 18. So I was accepted as being an older brother, and I never stepped over the line with any of them. We just became good mates, as you do in that sort of a situation. And I enjoyed my whole 3 years. In fact, I enjoyed from the very first day I walked into the student, because we did anatomy the first day. I was sold on physiotherapy, and I've never, ever looked back from that day on.
Yeah. You said there were 35 girls, and how many guys were in your
There was
cohort?
two other guys at the beginning, but both of them failed. Rather, when I say failed, one of them repeated second year, but the other chap repeated, rather failed third year. And he was the only failure of the year. But that was pretty standard. Only about 10% of the physiotherapy class in those years were males. It wasn't until later on, until sports medicine got going, that you could see a career path for males, and that put a lot of them in.
Right. And where were you studying at this stage? Like, where was your university degree?
Well, there was only one university in Queensland at that stage. It was University of Queensland. Now I think there are 5 universities in southeast Queensland that offer physiotherapy as a course. So
Right.
it was University of Queensland, and it was a great university. I just loved every bit of it. Everything about the university life, everything about my studies, and what it led to.
Yeah. So just stepping back a little bit. So you said you had one brother. What did he go? Was he older or younger, or where did he head off to?
He was 18 months younger than me, and he did accounting. And a sister who came along 18 years later, which surprised mother and father and us to boys. And she, of course, was a delight of our life. And she's poor rotten. She's now 62, but she's become my great friend. Yeah, she got a master's degree in teaching. So
yeah. Okay. So undergraduate was absolutely blast, and you went into, I'm guessing, the public sector at this stage when you graduated?
Because I worked in the repatriation department, they'd offered me a job back there straight away. And so I went, I got through at the end of 1966. So I worked in the public service and at Greenslopes for a couple of months, and then I decided it really wasn't what I wanted to do, because I thought I wasn't making a difference to these old diggers. I probably was, but I was too impatient at that age. And then as it turns out, because I played football and rugby, I played a lot of sport at school, and in the interim years, I represented the state at boxing. I played football right through when I was 29 and in good grade, and did athletics till I was 40. So I had a good sporting background. And then one day I got an offer from a doctor who was actually the rugby league doctor and needed a physio. His wife started up a small practice but couldn't cope with 4 kids. So he asked me to come along, and so I did. I went and started straight away. I bought the practice and started up in the sports medicine practice. Well, it wasn't sports medicine. There was no word used in those days in 1967. Well, there was. They'd only had 2 meetings. So I started up in this practice on the day I got married in March 1967, had a honeymoon and came back and started my practice. And it was completely new. There was no such thing as sports medicine in any of my studies. There was only 3 males in Brisbane in private practice, and they were all Second World War guys. There was only about 20 physios in practice in the whole of Queensland. So it was a new profession, and because we were first contact, or rather we weren't first contact, it was a good career path, but it had its difficulties.
Yeah, I think that when you just mentioned that, I think that bears some elaboration. We didn't get first contact practitioner until 77, 78. Would that be about right?
That's right. And that was done by my friend Prue Gelly. I was actually on her committee for that. And I was extremely glad and privileged to be there, because up till that time, every patient that I saw had to be referred by a doctor. But because I got involved in sporting teams, and I'll mention how I got involved in a minute, every sportsman who wanted to come to me because of my experience as the years went on had to go and see their local doctor. As it turned out, every team had a doctor, and I got to know them well. And they just said, just go and see Peter Dornan. Don't worry about it, I'll give you a referral. But it was still a nuisance, because I got to know more about sporting injuries than probably all the doctors who were referring to me. How I got involved in sports medicine. The very first week back from my honeymoon, I was due to go to what's called Ballymore. That was the heart of rugby union. Ballymore had only been turned into rugby union in February 1967. Before then, it had been rugby league, and I played rugby league after I left school at Ballymore. But it was bought by rugby union, and I knew the field well. And I'd only been back a week, went out to play my first game, and the secretary grabbed me and said, "Look, we're thinking of putting a physiotherapist in as a as an ambulance man, they've only, right throughout Australia, all they had was ambulance men for every game. So I said, that sounds like a good idea. I'd like to be involved in that. So when the first sort of Queensland Rugby Union game came up, I was the first physio for that. Then I was first physio for the Wallabies, all in the same year. And then because I was working in a practice with a rugby league doctor, he invited me to become the first physio for the Queensland Rugby League and for the Kangaroos. And because there was no one else doing this sort of thing, so I really was the start of that. And then, of course, once I got the hang of things, I got involved in soccer, Australian rules, basketball, netball, every sport, because I was the only one seeing sporting injuries. And
pays to be unique, doesn't it?
Well, it does pay to be unique because the whole attitude as a physio in those days was different to what we were taught as a student. But it was very passive, practically no hands-on, and maybe just machines, ultrasounds and each machine, which can be used very correctly in the right way. That wasn't a denigration because I still use those machines now as part and parcel of the treatment. But we didn't use exercise as a means of therapy, even though exercise is a cornerstone of physiotherapy and was mentioned as such. We didn't use it very much. It wasn't until they just opened up Lewisham Sports Medicine Clinic the same year. And so I flew down to Lewisham to the third meeting of the AGM of Sports Medicine Australia. It was called ASMF in those days. And so I spent some time there seeing how they use in the intensive therapy. They used ice and they used exercise very well. But I was also invited at that meeting to start up a Queensland branch because we didn't have a Queensland branch. So when I came back, I mentioned to the doctor I was working with that we should start up a Queensland branch. So he said, yes, he'd been thinking of that. So in 1970, between the two of us, we got together a meeting. He invited his doctors. I invited all my phys eds and physios and alternative people, and we had the first meeting of Sports Medicine Queensland. But that also started off my interest in how to treat sports injuries, and that gave me a terrific advantage over anyone else who was treating sports medicine. And that was the third AGM at sports medicine.
And we're still only talking 1970 here, so we haven't even got to first contact practitioner status in 77, 78, have we?
No, we haven't. No, indeed not. And that didn't come along, I said, until I think I was on the committee about 77, 78. That was about right. I thought about 80 before it was approved. I could be wrong. But anyway, it certainly came. It didn't come soon enough. And that did a couple of things. That then put the onus back on physios to become far more professional, far more responsible. And even though I'd done a lot of work studying what I was doing with my injuries, as much as I could, I still needed to up my act a heck of a lot. So the second thing that happened that was one of the big events of my life for physio was I went back to uni with the idea of doing a master's qualifying because I only had a diploma in those days. That's all they gave you. And Professor Margaret Bullock was the first PhD in Australia. And so she was my mentor and supervisor and became my great friend. And she taught me how to do critical appraisal of everything, because I wouldn't have been to the library more than 3 times over those sort of previous 10 years. This was 1976. And she taught me how to write. And that was a big thing, how to be critical. She had red marks all over my first essay I gave her. I said, what the hell is this? I know what I'm doing. So after 4 years, she taught me how to write. And I think that's where my big change came. So at the end of the 4 years, I said, I've got a lot of experience here and there's nothing written on sports medicine. So I wrote the first book on sports injuries in Australia. I'll hold it up here to show you. And that was called A Trainer's Guide. And that sold very quickly all over the place to trainers, to physios, phys eds and doctors. And that was the only one and first one for many years. And then I got a partner coming with me, it's a colleague called Richard Dunn. Dick was a Vietnam veteran, came back and had a loss, and he was playing rugby at the same team I was, and he came in with an injury. He liked what I was doing, so he went back at 27 years old to study physio. The minute he got through, I put him on working for me. And so we then wrote the next book because we were asked to upgrade it, and that was called Sporting Injuries. And this was about 350 pages, and it was certainly the definitive book on sports medicine at the time. It was still the only one, and that gave me a chance to bring out my artwork. So I did 300 drawings for it, or medical illustrations, which smartened me up that way. So it was a good way to learn ourselves because we were forced to go and study, and so that was really my big part about sports medicine.
This decision to go into sports medicine, you said you played a lot of sports. Do you think it was just a natural progression for you, or were there key decisions you were making at the time to move into this new field?
Well, there was no way to do it. There was no such thing as sports medicine when I was starting in practice, and I was prepared just to start up there and build up and go and see whatever physios did in those days. But because I got this offer to work as a rugby league doctor, the rugby league patients were going there, but then the rugby union patients followed me across. And because I realised that I had an extra skill that no other physio did, and they wanted to get back on the field by yesterday. Nothing's sort of changed with sportsmen. They want to get every advantage they can to be back on the field by yesterday. And so that pushed my whole way of thinking into a different mode. And I just sort of automatically grew with it. And I might say this book, which I just held up, I believe influenced probably a whole generation of young physios for about 15 years, until along came Bruckner and Kahn, who of course did the best book in the world.
And you've we're jumping around a lot here. So
I'm sorry.
No, not at all. It's brilliant because it's just, really, they talk about explorers, and when it comes to physiotherapy, there's no doubt that literally a pioneer. And there wasn't sports medicine, there wasn't first contact practitioner status, and a lot of these things that we now just take for granted, I guess, just think it's always been the case. Well, this sort of conversation just points out that it wasn't the case at all.
Well, things that happened that really changed while I was there. In the early 70s, no one ever did a warm-up, ever. We'd just drive out to the field, hop out, and we'd start to play, even in the wintertime. It wasn't until I got involved with what's called the intensive training squad in rugby league, because New South Wales are whipping us so much in rugby league. They take our players because of the pokies, and so we said, well, so they've got 20 of the top young footballers all around Queensland who were 20 years old, put them into rugby league, park at Lang Park, and Dr. Hobbs was a doctor and I was a physio and a trainer, and we've got another trainer called Colin O'Brien. And to help, he was studying physio also. He was also there was two other guys. There was Peter Moore, who was a Wallaby, and Colin O'Brien, who also played in the same club as me, and they came in with injuries, so they went back and did physio, and they became top sports physios. And so we got Colin while he was a student to do the phys ed part. So it took 8 weeks, and we trained them up intensively. We told them how to do weights for the first time. No one did weights. She showed them how to do weights, how to do sprinting, and how to do a warm-up. And so from that, we started the warm-ups for everybody, and I took that back to rugby union for the Wallabies and for the Kangaroos, but rather for the Wallabies and the Queensland team and my team of brothers. And so the warm-up started virtually from there, as far as I'm concerned. But the other thing that happened was weight training. No one did weights. And all of a sudden they could see they needed to get stronger to beat New South Wales. They didn't beat them that well. It wasn't until we had what's called the State of Origin in 1980 that we really got on top of them. But anyway, that's things started to change. So before then, no one did weights. I introduced weights to most of them, and no one did warm-up, and I did the warm-up for most of them as well. So they're things we took for granted.
It's interesting because I was reading a biography, John McEnroe, and he was talking about his rise through tennis, but there was this guy called Bjorn Borg that kept on beating the crap out of him.
Yeah, sure.
And once, after being it was a 5-setter Grand Slam final at Wimbledon, and Bjorn won it, and he and McEnroe went back into the change rooms, and McEnroe said, I just can't get it. Like, how can you keep on beating me? Like, what am I missing out on as far as a tennis player? And Bjorn said to him, well, how many weight sessions a week do you do? And McEnroe said, I don't do any. I just play tennis. And that's exactly the same thing. I think that was when tennis players started to realize that in addition to playing tennis, they have to do these other things such as weights. And next Wimbledon round, guess who won?
Yeah.
It was the first time McEnroe beat Bjorn Borg.
Well, that idea transferred across to every sport in Queensland, and well, probably Australia eventually, that you have to do weight training to improve your strength. That doesn't improve skill until you add skill things to it, and that made a big difference to practically everyone. Everyone does weights these days, including civilians, hopefully. So,
Yeah.
mm.
Now we've run through club, state, national, international rugby in a fast little slather there. You were like the first pretty much in all of those places. Were you realizing in your own mind that you were stepping up like from a state to a national level? Like, was there a difference in what you were doing or the pressures that you were under, or did it still feel like club rugby?
No, I didn't even think along those lines. I just accepted what was in front of me. I said, "Well, I'm going out to become physio for the Wallabies today," and I just did, because there were no rules. I mean, and the ambulance men had done a good job. They would amble out generally overweight and smoking, and I introduced a whole new concept that you run onto the field. And I actually, in my first book, I wrote the word PALM, PALM, and that was a mnemonic of how, that was, don't panic, ask, look, and move. And that became pretty much a standard for physios for a long time, or trainers for a long time. So I really changed the whole way that we looked at injuries, and I think a lot of it's still done now. So I didn't make it. Didn't realize that I'm doing something special. It's just what I was doing with my life, and I grasped it, because I could have been a farmer,
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm interested in like how many people I've interviewed have had country backgrounds, and asking them how has that country background influenced the way they view the world and the things that they take as a high priority. Would you say your country background has given you direction in making decisions and how you relate to people?
No, in one respect, country people are they're pretty relaxed, they're pretty calm, and they accept everybody on face value. They're nothing. There's nothing suspicious about any of them. You used to leave your doors open at night time, and you trusted everybody. I still have that trust with everybody I meet now. I still don't think that guy's going to knock me on the head. And I trust what he says. I take him at his word. I think that's probably one thing I did get from the country background. And often that's the wrong way. You can't do that with a lot of people, but I still give them the benefit of the doubt. When I first meet them, until they do something wrong with me, I accept them for who they are, and I work with them.
You've been in. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was going to say that how physio has proliferated in those years. I could see that the males started to come into the course because they could see that I was making a career in sports medicine. So males started to come in. I think it's about 60-40 now, 60% females and 40% males. But now there are actually, whereas I started off in a place called Kelvin Grove, and there was no physios between Kelvin Grove and in Taringa, which was probably about 5 kilometres away. And so after 10 years, I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to leave the influence of the doctors. So I got enough confidence to say, I know who I am, and I don't need their influence anymore. Not that it was bad or good, but I just needed to be by myself. So I moved to Toowong, which is halfway. There was no one in Toowong. There are now 17 physios in Toowong. So I just wanted to make the point that physios are all over the place. And people say, but there's not going to be enough work for us all. But we all get work, we all create our own path, and because there was no special interests groups in when I first started. Notice I almost said in my day. That's completely wrong. My day is still my day here now. But in those early days, there were no special interest groups. There are now 27, I think. So there is no excuse not to keep on moving around or trying to morph into one other group if you get bored with another. And I think that's what I wanted to sort of say to you next. After about 10 years of this intense, fabulous life, and I'd go out to games 3 or 4 times on a weekend. I'd go and I'd see patients at night time, and anytime I could or was needed to. And I got involved in the whole culture, and it was marvelous. But after a while, I started to get jaded, run down, and not look after myself. And I just all of a sudden one day I said, I'm going to this game, and it's on instant replay. I've seen it before, and I'm getting bored. And I was getting symptoms of what's now known as burnout. It wasn't in those days. And so I lost empathy, I lost feeling, I'd lost everything. So I said, I better get out of this. And so I took my wife and kids to Europe. I said, let's stop what I'm doing for a while. I had 6 weeks. I need to reassess my life and find out what I'm doing wrong, what I might be, and what I have to do to protect myself and to keep on getting longevity. And what I can find out, most physios burn out, and that's the word they use now, after about 5 to 7 years, because of the intensity. They love their work, and there's often no career path for them, and but they also don't know how to balance their life out. So what happened was that I, on the way across, there was an international physiotherapy conference at Singapore, which I went to, and that gave me a good break for international speakers, which I've had before, but there was one particularly called Leo Biscaglia. He started up have you heard of him? Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah. Well, he was the guest speaker of the board over from LA. He just started up a course called Love. And that's not what it sounds like, but it was a new age stuff then. And he read out something then that turned my life around, which is ridiculous to think it did, but it helped. Would you like me to read it out?
Yeah, please.
It's only about half a page, but it's the sort of thing. He was saying that life is not all about empire building, power, sex, or status, or ego. And he started me thinking, so he finished by reading out a letter which appeared in the Journal of Humanistic Psychology. It was written by an 85-year-old man who was dying. He says, if I had my life to live over again, I'd try to make more mistakes next time. I wouldn't try to be so perfect. I would relax more. I'd limber up. I'd be sillier than I've ever been on this trip. In fact, I know very few things that I would take so seriously. I'd be crazier. I'd be less hygienic. I'd take more chances. I'd take more trips. I'd climb more mountains. I'd swim more rivers. I'd watch more sunsets. And I'd go more places I've never been to. I'd travel. I'd eat more ice cream and less broccoli. I'd have more actual troubles and fewer imaginary ones. You see, I was one of those people who lived prophylactically and sensibly and sanely, hour after hour and day after day. Oh, I've had my moments, but if I had to do it all over again, I would have nothing but beautiful moments, moment by moment by moment. I'm one of those people who never went anywhere without a thermometer, a hot water bottle, a raincoat, and a parachute. If I had to do it all over again, I'd travel lighter next time. If I had to do it all over again, I'd start barefoot earlier in the spring and stay that way later in the fall. I'd ride more merry-go-rounds, I'd watch more sunrises, and I'd play with more children if I had my life to live over again. But you see, I don't. I was 35 then, and I'm getting close to 85 now. So that took me very seriously. And by the time we'd been to Europe, been around all the art houses and museums for 2 kids, 9 and 7, I came back with a completely new view on life and on myself. And I said, I'm going to have to redesign my life as a business plan. And that's what I did. So I sat down and worked out what I needed to do to make myself healthy and well and fulfilled. So I divided my life up into a pie with 6 different things, and I can just tell you the headings briefly if you'd like me to do that.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking when I was about 24, I came across Leo's book. I think it was called Living, Loving, Learning, but it was a real eye-opener to just, watch your quality of life and make some decisions about how to improve it. And it was quite, even then, an eye-opener.
Well, he summarised that for the speech he gave, which had us all in a standing ovation. And I came back and got the book and read it and learnt it. And that's where I found this article again. So yes, he was age then, but it was certainly a good time for me to listen to a good learner. So what I did, I just found balance, and I just tell you simply, the goal was not to eliminate stress. Without stress, there is no challenge. The art was to get to a level where it could assist me to enjoy a stimulating lifestyle. So what I did was divide my life up into 6 basic dimensions: professional, financial, social, cultural, creative, and personal. And the personal was to look after myself better, and that meant to look after the wellness triad of the big red: rest, exercise, and diet. So I changed my whole life around over years. So I really have done that. So that means I stepped away a great deal from my 70 hours a week. I took off 2 mornings a week to do something creative, something artistic, or studies, or write, or whatever I wanted to do. I still work 40 hours a week, but I balanced it out. So I always had time to do the creative things, to see my kids and my grandkids, and to go to the movies and the theatres and go to parties. That's what it meant, and to also study and to learn about culture. And I travelled at least twice a year to somewhere. So over the years, that's how I balanced it out. So I guess that's what I wanted to say in summary for that.
Yeah.
And in the background, just to show off, that's the sort of sculpture that I do. I learned sculpture. I came back and we were in an anatomy department doing some research there, and there was a couple of young chaps there in jeans and t-shirt, which you didn't wear in those days. I said, "Who are you?" Looking at anatomy. He said, "Well, we're here. I'm learning. My sculpture teacher has sent me to learn anatomy, and my friend Tony Parker was teaching them." So I said, "I'd like to meet him." So I went over the next week, met him as a very charming European man from Russia who was trained in Moscow before the war, and started up the first classical sculpture clinic in Australia, or in Queensland anyway. So I sat in with him every Thursday morning for the next 10 years, and I learned classical sculpture, which I have done for 45 years. So that's one of the things that I did for sculpture, and that's in the Queensland Club. I've done about 75 now, but they're all purely for hobbies. I've also learned painting. That's one of my paintings as well. It's a ballet dancer. So I've tried to find something that's unique in me to try and get it out to be fulfilled. And then of course I do that with writing, with my books. I've written, I haven't written just sports medicine books. I've written four military books for my hobbies and my interests, and 2 on pelvic pain and 1 on prostate cancer.
Did you know, like when we talk about your creative side, did you know that you had that? Like, would you say that flowed from your parents, or you've discovered that in yourself?
I don't know where it came from, but I always won the art prize at Brisbane Boys College at school. But I couldn't do much with it. I tried. I thought, oh, that might be a way to get a career. So I took around my artworks, and that they said, "Look, you've got to know someone for starting this, but secondly, your colour's off." And I said, "I'm colourblind." So that was one big drawback. I was extremely colourblind. I said, I might go to Duntroon because there aren't the young men for Duntroon. So I applied for Duntroon, but I was turned around because I was colourblind. So the quick answer is, even though I knew I had an artistic streak in me, and I think it came from my grandfather, because he used to do a lot of whittling with wood, but no one else in the whole family had any art. But I wanted to do it. So that's why I was happy to do the drawings for my book here. But so that's why I never did painting. I only started up painting the last 3 years, and I've got my carer sitting over my shoulder to make sure the paint is right. My carer being my darling wife of 56 years, it's got great colour sense.
Now we come back to physio. There've been several turning points in your professional focus. Like it really started, and obviously went with a big bang in regards to the burgeoning sports physio field. And the next sort of professional focus seemed to be around in 1996 when you were diagnosed with prostate cancer, age of 52. How did that come about, and what sort of effect did it have on you initially?
I thought I was pretty smart by keeping healthy and fit, and the gurus had said, if you keep healthy and fit, you may not get heart attacks or maybe cancers. But when I got prostate cancer, it just pretty well flattened me. I was extremely fit then and very well and at the peak of my career. And this pretty well flattened me to get prostate cancer. As a health professional, I did not know what my prostate was, where it was, or what it did. I don't even remember learning about anatomy because we never talked about it. And so that flattened me for a start. But secondly, I was given 3 to 5 years to live. And at that stage, 65% of you had a 65% chance of living for 5 years in those days. Now it's 95%. But in those days, if I didn't have surgery, I had a good chance of dying within 3 to 5 years. So I accepted surgery as being to get it out. My dad died of bowel cancer at 60 years old, so I wanted to get rid of it very quickly. So I did that, but that had 3 terrible side effects. The first was incontinence, the second was impotence, and the third was depression. And they were all hard to handle, mainly because there was no pathways or support groups or men to talk to about how to get out of it. So doctors didn't have a clue. They were just simply there to save my life. But I realised that some of my physio female friends treated females with incontinence. So I approached them and they taught me how to do what every female knows, and that's basic pelvic floor exercises. And that was a help. That got it down from 6 pads a day after 6 months to about 1 pad a day. I could work with that because with the side effects, I couldn't work, I couldn't make love, I couldn't exercise, I could do nothing. My life was over. So that brought it back to the stage where I could do that. And then I stayed that way for about 3 years, and then I got a fellowship to the United States to go and visit all the major prostate cancer groups in America. I came back with a lot of ideas on how to treat it. I'd seen surgeries and stuff. But the biggest change was from what my friend Paul Hodges and Ruth Stassel were doing with their research. They showed that the pelvic floor muscles are actually associated and attached usually to your rotator cuff muscles, to your rotator muscles, to your abs. And so I came back with the idea, I'm going to get myself superbly fit. I'm going to make my abs and my pelvic floors work at the same time. So I lifted weights, punched a bag, and I still punch a bag even. I always punched a bag because I was a boxing champion, and I always still punch. And I ran and I did everything. And by 3 months, I actually was perfectly dry, and I have been dry ever since. So that I added that. That's when I decided to write a book about it. And after that, that was about 2000. After 4 years, and then I was so elated with my newfound life, as opposed to the chances of dying and the side effects. I got depression, by the way. That was one of the side effects. It was a reactive depression because I couldn't understand my life had changed so much. I was a grieving loss. But once I got rid of the incontinence, my depression went, and I got a new life. You go through the stages of with grief. You go through 4 stages of denial, which males are good at, anger, you blame somebody, and then you get depression, and then eventually you come to acceptance. And finally you get what's called, if you're lucky, if you have got enough insight and enough help, you get what's called post-traumatic transformational growth. So you actually grow from this sort of an adversity if you're lucky enough. And so I did. I was really elated. So I said, I'm going to do something. I'm going to climb a mountain to prove my incontinence worked and to prove I'm alive. So I then trained for another year to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which I did when I was 60 years old. And I summited on St. Valentine's Day, which is emotional to me because without my partner to help me, I sang a love song, which didn't come out very well because I couldn't do it because there was no oxygen. No idea of the one I sang before. So anyway, and so that's what I did. It was just a sort of a closure to the whole thing. The impetus took a lot of time to get over, and the depression went. So the other thing that happened, because I had no one to help me, I said there must be some other men out there who are going through what I'm going through. So I put an ad in the paper, and 70 men and their partners turned up at the first meeting. They had it in my rooms. And so I knew that was what I needed to do. So we started up a support group. I morphed into the idea of convener. And we met at my rooms for a couple of years. And then the Cancer Council Queensland realised that I was doing this. They'd been trying for years to help men, but no one put their hand up. So they invited me back to the Cancer Council Queensland rooms. And from there, we'd have meetings every month, which I ran for the next 20 years, some 260 meetings, inviting along specialists, inviting men to come along and tell their story. We eventually got to 1,000 men, which is the largest support group of anything in Australia at the time. We now have 30 groups in Queensland and 170 in Australia. But at the same time, there were 3 other, that I was starting off, there were 3 other groups, 2 in Sydney, 1 in Melbourne, or 1 in Adelaide, I think 1 in Adelaide or Melbourne. And we got together and formed what's called the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia, which is now the peak consumer body for prostate cancer. So they've been the ones that made the great changes. So now 95%, so every man has got to help. There are nurses out there now who help at every institution. Every man has a pathway to go through. They learn how to do pelvic floor exercises. They learn how to manage erectile dysfunction. They learn about incontinence. They learn about depression. So things have changed dramatically. So I guess in a nutshell, that's what happened to me with prostate cancer. That changed my life. I became a men's health activist, and I talked about it in 2020. I was the Queensland Surgeons Forum of the Year. with on the back of men's health.
This is going to throw a curveball at you, Peter. Can you remember what the advert read like that you put into the paper that brought 70 people out of the woodwork literally into your clinic in regards to prostate cancer?
Something like, I've actually got the original thing here back in my record, but it's something like, is there anyone out there who has prostate cancer and has side effects and wants to talk about it? Please meet in my rooms. It was only about 2 inches by 2 inches. But 70 men turn up with their wives, and the partners are the ones who brought them along. The partners have the big support group. We actually had a female, we had a partner support group as well, because when the men are first diagnosed, it's actually the women who get knocked around more because they think they're going to lose their partner as well. So they needed support as much as men did. So we had another support group going.
Yeah. No, it's just, it's come so far, but I still think we are so far behind, given males, it's a higher rate of cancer for men. It's a higher death rate for men than breast cancer. Yeah. And yet I still think the awareness is so far behind. The support is still so far behind. It's gone a long way, but there's so much more to do.
Well, our three aims when we got started was to help ourselves, to make ourselves more aware, to get advice on how to treat our side effects in ourselves. The second aim was to teach the medical profession how to look after us better. And that was not back to them because they didn't look after us, they saved their lives, but they needed to know about the psychosocial effects and how to help us get through this. And the third was to make the public more aware, and was to make men more aware and their partners of what prostate cancer was, to try and get on some sort of a par as what breast cancer was. And that's taken a lot of time and still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm living in a farming community here, and that's kind of, I guess, my goal for the next 10 or 15 years is to raise awareness within blokes, within the community, just like what can be done, and not let them sit back and say, well, I've got it and that's just it, and stick my head in the sand. And we've got to raise that awareness within men too. I think they've got to take that responsibility that they can do something about this.
Congratulations, and you must keep that going. One of the things that really, really made me passionate about it, after I'd been going in this group about 2 years, I got a phone call from a chap from Dalby who wasn't far from where my farm was. That's about 300 miles west of here. And he said, mate, I hear what you're doing. I've got prostate cancer, I've got incontinence, but if I walk out to my back door, there are 3 other farms, all with men with the same problem, and one jumped under a tractor 2 weeks ago. Yeah. They become so depressed with it, they get ideations of suicide. And so that really pushed me along the way. So we got a support group started at Toowoomba. We've got them all over Queensland now. But yes, the need is there, and it was there, and it's still there. So the rural people miss out a lot. So if you can do whatever you can, I'll give you every help I can. Mm-hmm.
Now, you've not only climbed Kilimanjaro, you've also gone Aconcagua and Elbrus, different ages. I think when I looked at it, it was about 66 and 71 years of age. Do these mountains represent other challenges for you, or are they just a continuation of maintaining your fitness and having a goal to aim towards?
There's that to it as well. And you think, people often ask me, why the hell am I climbing mountains at any age, let alone my age I was at? It's something, as soon as you put yourself under adversity, you then start to look into yourself more. Carl Gibran wrote a story, he had a nice little saying that once you reach the summit, now you start to climb. What that means is as soon as you start to challenge yourself, you then strip off the veneers if you want to get higher and higher, and ask more of yourself. You get rid of all the veneers that's been put on you by your school, by your church, by the government, by the peers, and by anyone to say you can't do that. And so you then look inside yourself. So yes, it is actually a journey towards yourself as much as a journey to the top. And I enjoyed that journey. I first got that journey when I walked the Educator Trail in 1983, before all this happened. And just briefing my father, what set me on this track was that my father died, and his death was attributed, he died at 60, his death was attributed to attrition on the Educator Trail, which surprised me tremendously because I didn't know much about it at all. We didn't learn about the Educator Trail. I didn't know really done much up there. I actually lectured right around New Guinea in 1971 with sports medicine. And I came back and told Dad, I said, I've been to a place called Educator Trail. He said, yes, son, I've been there. I don't want to know about it. And that's the last he said. But it didn't hit me that when he died, and then I got his file because I still had contacts there and found out yes, he had so many things wrong, including PTSD. It wasn't called that, it was called anxiety neurosis, and about 3 or 4 other diseases from Educator Trail. So I needed to find out why he didn't tell me and what happened to him, what was that about. So I actually had a patient walked in just after that, and he was on my doorstep. I said, "What's wrong with you, mate?" He said, "I've hurt my back walking the Dakota Trail." And he was taking young cadets up there. He was a military man. So I said, "Next time you go, I want you to take me," because he had to be flown out, and I'll help you to get him fit. So in 1983, he said, "I'm going now." So I got fit for another 6 months with a backpack on and climbed up the mountain at the back there for 6 months. I was doing weights, of course. I was extremely fit. But when we got to Kokoda, and we took 15 of the top cadets in Queensland and New South Wales, just Doug and I, and we got to, within the first day, it was hot, humid, about 80 degrees humidity, and the temperature was grossly hot. And after walking for 2 hours through the plantation, I was exhausted. I had a 25-kilogram backpack on, which I've never had on in my life. It was a tremendous insult. And I went behind a rock and I cried, and I said, "I can't do this, Doug, that's just not in me." And he said, just think about it. So I did, and then I got all the ghosts of the men who'd been up there, who'd died there, who'd done far more than me. And so I found this little voice inside of, and I put aside that rising voice of panic. And I said, "You can do this." So I did one step after the other, and I found who I was. That was when you really pushed back the jolly veneers. And by the time I got there, after 10 days, 96 kilometres, over 250 streams, and camping out at night with my food on the back, I was a profoundly changed person in many ways. I understood the Dakota Trail. I understand what Dad didn't talk about. I wasn't being shot at. But then that led me to appreciate myself more. And so when I did Kilimanjaro, I knew I had a lot more inside me than what I thought I had. And the same with the next mountain. So I thought when I'd done Kilimanjaro, that was it. But this little man inside said, "I need more challenges." But it was also a way to keep fit. And I needed to keep fit, to keep on working as a physio. Most physios retire at 60, 65, but I needed to keep on going. So I got very fit and I climbed Mount Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in the Americas. And then when I was 66, and then when I was 71, I climbed Mount Elbrus, which is the highest mountain in Europe. It's higher than Mont Blanc or anywhere else there. So, but then, and when I was 75, I climbed around the Italian Alps, Grand Paradiso. And then, of course, COVID came, and I'm 80 now, so I probably won't be able to do much more. But I still will climb around the mountains around here. So what you try and do, you try and keep on challenging yourself, so you find just what you're made of and who you're made of, and just what components you have that you were given as gifts, and that means my creative stuff as well as everything else. So at the end of it, when I get to 85, I'll have known I've challenged myself in every way I can possibly get. Nothing I say I've got no regrets about. And that, by the way, I must finish off at the Dakota bit. At the 50th anniversary of the Dakota Trail, I was asked to do a sculpture to commemorate the occasion. So I said, there were 607 men who died on the Dakota Trail, and there was only one Victoria Cross winner. So I traced him up as a chap called Bruce Kingsbury from Melbourne. So I traced him up, because he died on the trail, but I traced up his best mate, who was still alive, and he was mate of him since schoolboys, and was beside him when he died. And so he gave me all the directions on what he wore and what happened that day. And so I did the sculpture and then presented it to the battalion at their reunion. And then all these men started coming to me and told me what happened on that day. And all of a sudden I knew I had a rich story here. These men were telling me things I told nobody else. And so for the next 5 years, I researched them all, put the story together, and wrote my first military book called The Silent Men, because I didn't talk. And that was the first book on Educator in modern times. And that took me on my military writing after that. So that allows me to close that door.
Well, I was just going to say the exact opposite, that, you know, doing one thing leads to another that's completely unexpected. And, you know, I think I've had that conversation with lots of people. They sort of say, I never thought this would happen, but it started because I did something else. And
Yeah.
I think we just got to take opportunities and see where they go.
One thing Leo says on that talk where you gave us, he said, if you open up one door, there are 5 doors behind, and there are 5 doors behind that. And that's exactly what happens if you, and by the way, you talked about the explorer, you didn't say gene, but there's such a thing as an explorer gene. It's called an R7 variant. And there's about 20% of people have it, and they're the ones who are the explorers, the discoverers. Every scientist has got a problem. Most physiotherapists, they try and push themselves, and they're the ones that take our civilization or our race from one level to the next. They look around behind the next mountain or over the next river, and so they're the ones who open up those doors in the first place. Most people don't. They sit behind there and stay where they are. But if they open up that one door, there's 5 behind them. So I've written military books now.
As a question, do you think you would have done all this climbing and physical pursuit if you hadn't have had prostate cancer?
I don't see why I would have. There wasn't one reason to do it. I kept fit as long as I could, but I probably would have retired at 60, 65. But the thing that kept me going wasn't prostate cancer. It wasn't climbing mountains. It was pelvic pain. And I don't know whether you understood what I've done with that, but 20 years ago exactly, I had my urologist came into my room with a crook back. He was unfit, so I said, "Go and get fit." So he went to the gym and hurt his back, and he said, "Look, I was doing some lunges and some deep squats," and he said, "Well, I diagnosed him very quickly as having a sacroiliac joint problem, treated him with manipulation and exercise, and sent him on his way." He rang up the next day and said, "Mate, thank you, my back's a lot better, but so is my testicular pain." I said, "Well, you didn't say you had that. You never tell a physio that when you walk in." He said, "What did you do?" He said, "Well, you saw what I did." He said, "Well, I've been this for 2 years. I've been to every specialist and doctor around the place. And I was going to get my testicle cut off in 2 weeks' time. Whatever you did, I've got a whole lot of other patients which have got very similar symptoms." So he sent me a half a dozen of them, all with pelvic pain symptoms. They all got better by manipulating the spine. He said, "Whatever you've done, I've got no idea what it was." So we worked out it was a nerve eventually, and of course it was a pudendal nerve. And we worked out. So I eventually went back to uni and with Paul Hodges' help, with Gwen Joel's help, Paul Hodges and local Michelle Coppertiers, who's a specialist in musculoskeletal and in pain, went to anatomy department again, and we cut open the body to find out where the pudendal nerve went in relation to the sacroiliac joint. And we worked out when you rotate the pelvis, and the pelvis is normally, the sacrum's only, the pelvic bone's only got about 2 degrees movement on the sacrum. Go past it and you're going to get a sprain. So if you take it past that, the sacrotuberous and sacrospinous ligaments can then cut across the pudendal nerve where it comes out. So if you get a rotation on your pelvis, in most ways, but particularly in anterior and posterior rotation, it will cut across that nerve. So all I had done was to maybe pull the joint back in the other direction and release it. So then I spent the next 5 years doing research and finally got a trial published. And so I told the urologist what I was doing, and Les told him as well, my urologist. So my practice is now completely treating pelvic pain by musculoskeletal approach. I've become a member of the United States International Pelvic Pain Society 20 years ago. I go there every 2 years and know what I can. But not many people do the pelvic, do the musculoskeletal approach, which is a shame because it's a really handy way to treat pelvic pain.
And just to throw in there like a contemporary question, could you treat pudendal neuralgia or pudendal pain without hands-on approach?
No. Having said that, what happens is that the pelvis rotates and it gets heals and it scars and it gets stuck there. Sometimes if you do the exercise they're designed about 5 exercises which are very specific for the sacroiliac joint. Sometimes I'll release it if it's only a very mild case. And yes, a quick answer is that sometimes can do it. But if it's stuck, that joint is the biggest, strongest joint of the body. It wasn't meant to be moved by exercise. Otherwise, running across the savannah to get a jolly zebra, we'd have jumped over a rock and our species would have died out. So it's a big, strong, tough joint, and it has to be moved by assertive mobilization. So I give classes every now and then on this, and I did a lot before COVID came along with my friend Craig Ellingham, with my friend Joe Milios, and so the 4 of us formed what was called the Martians. And we used to run the courses called Mastering the Martians, and I talk on pelvic pain. So we made it very clear at the time that unless you did mobilising hands-on, you weren't going to get the best result. So that's where the musculoskeletal part comes in.
Now, we've sort of danced around a little bit. You've written your military history books and you've written your medical books. Does it get easier to write a book like the more often you've done it?
In one respect, yes, because you learn a plan. For my 4 military books, I use exactly the same plan for each of them. But by that time, I had gone through about 3 editors who taught me how to do that. I had also learned at the beginning from my master's degree, from Margaret Bullock and about 2 or 3 other PhDs, how to be critical about my writing. To write it in a book form is a different story again. So you need good editors. And they taught me to do the first book. I use exactly the same plans for the next 3. And for that matter, also for the incontinence book as well. I actually wrote a book, which I didn't hold up for you. I wrote the first book on male incontinence when I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And that book is still, that was the only book written on prostate cancer as well at that time. There's several good books out now, including one by my friend Craig Ellingham. But that's still used in every support group around Australia. So I use virtually the same plan for that, the same idea, written in layman's terms, layman's language with scientific backup. The pelvic pain ones, I used a bit different plan, but that worked very well. So you do get an idea what needs to be solved. But having said that, I hit a stumbling block when I was awarded Senior Australian of the Year for Queensland in 2020, COVID came at the very day almost that I got it. But my plan was to go all over the place and sprout in male's health. So I couldn't. So I decided to write a book about it. So I spent 2 years writing a book about every aspect of male's health. But and it's a lot to do with personal choices and how I help myself. So it's between a medical book and a personal journey or a self-help book. But I've tried 6 different publishers, and they all say, look, they love what I've written, but we haven't got a genre on men's health. There is nothing written on men's health. And because they become very special themselves, it's hard to get a publisher. But it took me 8 publishers to do the first book on silent men. I'm not giving up at all yet. I've got a fair way to go, and I'll keep on going because it's a good book and it'll be helpful when it comes out. So in answer to your question, it does get easier to write because there are formulas and you get a certain way about you with writing, but it's not always easy to get it published. It depends on the fashion at the time and who you've got with you.
So flip that question around a bit. You're obviously published as opposed to self-published. And have people come to you with a, I don't know, not so much a genre, but a title and a content that they want, or have you gone to them with a manuscript?
No, I've never written what anyone else wants me to write. I do it purely because there's a need for me to do it. I'm not commissioned by anybody. That would be someone else to do that. I only do what I need for my practice, for myself in personally. So all my sculptures, I don't do anything except what I need to do, unless someone comes to me with a really good idea and I say, yeah, I like that, let's do that. But for books, I've never written a book that someone else would want me to do.
So would you consider self-publishing for that one that you've tried 6 publishers for and actually say, no, this is a good book and I'll publish it myself?
That may come to that. And I've got several people who can help me with that because they've written, that 2 of the publishers already said, look, I can't publish it, but I can help you to self-publish and we can help you to get it sort of marketed. But I still don't want to do that yet. I'd much rather get it out there by itself and let someone else look after it. It's my baby at this stage, but I want it to go out to the world so I can do another baby.
So for those listening that may be interested in actually taking on this task or this journey of writing a book, do you have any tips or suggestions to get them started and sort of get them on the process?
Find something you're passionate about for a start. But I actually help a lot of people who are going through PTSD, a lot of Second World War guys, a lot of military people who don't know how to get out of their problems. So I say to them, look, and I say this also to a lot of grandparents my age, they've got nothing to do at home. So I look, get a textbook or get a book. Start on page 1. Say, I was born on a certain date, and by the end of one day, you've got a page written. Next day, go to page 2 and page 3, and bit by bit, your story will open up. And by the time you've got to about a year, you've got 365 pages. And so that's how you will start. So you'll get an idea. So say you want to write about a crook knee, well, you'll write, well, this bloke's got a crook knee, but I'll do the research on it, and bit by bit, you'll slowly put it together. By the end of the year, you've got all the information you want. You'll then chuck out all you don't want. It's like when you do a sculpture, where you start that with a big block of clay, and you chuck away everything that doesn't look like what you want it to look like. The same when you're writing, when you're doing a master's degree or when you're writing anything, you put everything down that you could possibly want. You do your research, then you chuck out what you don't want. So I would tell anyone, if they get any idea of something they want to write, start off that way. Start off modestly, write it down on a bit of paper, just 1 page, and then the next day you'll find you can do 2 pages, and then you'll start to do your research, and that will open up 1 door, and then there's 5 doors behind, there's 5 doors behind. It'll be self-motivating, and if you don't watch it, it'll be addictive, and it'll ruin your life.
Yeah. And 9 books later, I wish you never listened to this podcast.
Well, what I did eventually, when I got to 50 years marriage, my daughter said to me, "Dad, you need to know a bit more about how to work computers. Why don't you put all your trips down?" Because I've been over the world several times now, and because I think she was thinking that when I die, she'd have to go through all my photographs and check them out. So I selected 4 photographs for everywhere I'd been and put that into an album. So now I have 2 nice albums, the first 40 years and the next 10 years, and I've got the next 10 years coming up soon. And so that's something they can just keep, tuck the rest out. But then she also said, your grandkids need to know where you came from and your background. And so I started writing my history the same way. So I've just finished writing, well, it's a few years ago now, I call it The Kid from Kingaroy, because that's where I came from a peanut farm out there. And so I've written up a whole lot of them to give them my friends, to bore them silly, that it's really a cathartic thing for me to do, to work out where I come from. So I work out what's important to me and highlights. And so if anyone wants to know about Peter Dornan in 50 years' time, that particular Peter Dornan is here.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Hey, Pete, along your journey as a physiotherapist, what would you say has been the hardest thing that you've learned?
You asked me that in writing, and I had to think about that a little bit. Let me just say a couple of things if I can. So there's 3 things in your professional life so you asked me first, so what are 3 things in your professional life that stand out for you? And the first is the need for professional alliances. No man is an island. You have to get friends, you have to get colleagues, and you have to build on that. You cannot do anything by yourself. Secondly was you need to think outside of the box. So it's all very well doing evidence-based medicine. I love it. It's changed the way I do things. We all do things, and it also gives us status as a profession. We're the ones who do that. But when you hit a wall, you say, gosh, how do I get out of that? You have to be innovative, and you have to take a risk and a gamble that if I do it this way, it might be better. So the things that I would say that you never, ever get to a point and say, there's a wall there. You've got to go past evidence-based medicine and say, well, if I manipulate this way, or I get this guy to do so many weights a different way, it might work. So I would say, don't be frightened. And the third one is there's a persistence trumps talent every time until talent takes over. So what that means simply is no matter how much talent you've got, how intelligent or genius you've got, if you don't persist with it and build something with it, it's nothing. It's virtually nothing. But then, so if you start off with that, if you use persistence and build on it, eventually the talent will take over. So all you're going to get through is talented stuff in the end. And I think that's what you're asking. Is that right?
Oh yeah, I love it. I think consistency and persistency, wins out 99% of the time, because even if you look at AFL, there's plenty of talented players that drop to the side because they weren't willing to put in the time to maintain their consistency of performance.
Yeah, and that's just not in sport. That's in every field of life. you can get some geniuses who do everything, whether it's a clerk or whether it's anybody. But if you sit there with a great idea and don't use it, it's nothing. Just poof. Yeah.
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 Now, when you got down on your knee and proposed marriage to your lovely wife, did you say you're a peanut farmer or you're a physiotherapist? What attracted her to you?
I was neither at the time. I was doing first year physiotherapy, and my wife was doing her third year speech therapy. Dimity was in the first year of speech therapists in Queensland. There were only 7 of them who got through in that first year. And because her name started with C, Dimity Christ, she's got the first diploma. She's in Jurassic Park prematurely, and she's got that in 1964. So I could see that she was going to get through, but I was so enwrapped. I thought, I'm not letting anyone go past this. So I thought, how could she? Well, how could she not pick up on this? I'm a poor university student. It was colourblind, had no future, no career, and broke. And she turned me down. I said, "What? How could you possibly do that?" Yeah, that was the first time. And then anyway, I had another go later on when I knew that she wanted to travel. So I said, "Look, when I get through, what's going to take you traveling everywhere?" And so she fell for that line, and so she realised then I might have a future. So it wasn't. I didn't approach to her as a farmer. There were some rough edges in my farming life that I think she wanted to sort of fix up as well. So that wasn't attractive to her, although my open country style probably appealed to her. Certainly wasn't a physio with a great career path. So I wasn't a great catch at that stage. It just that I happened to talk her into it.
I think that word persistent comes in again.
It was. I had my second go.
Yeah, persistent rather than talent.
Yeah, well, I had no talent at the time to show her on anything. So I've spent the whole life showing off to her to think that she might have got a good bargain. So, so we've got 56 years up there, and we're very happy. Still very happy.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Timity's still working. She, as a speech therapist, she started up about 4 hospitals in Queensland, and then what she did, and I'll share with you, she started up with what's called the Hair and Say Clinic 30 years ago when the kids got out of the hair, and that was a clinic designed to teach deaf babies how to speak. At that stage, if you were born deaf, you would have to go into the signing community, and cochlear implant was just coming in. So she got a Churchill Fellowship for the States, learned how to do a particular technique called auditory verbal, which means you teach the parent. And so with intense training, if she can get any child before 2 years, she'd have them speaking and laughing and dancing and speaking without a cochlear, without signing. And so she started off in my room. So in our rooms, I built a place with her. We've been here in this, which I built 35 years ago. With just 6 patients, including one with Wally Lewis's daughter. Wally's a great rugby league player, and he was a great help to her. And then she got bigger and bigger and bigger until she finally built a $12.8 million state-of-the-art place with 100 staff and about 1,000 students. So she only retired from that last year, but she now runs what's called Bionics Queensland. And the hearing aid, or the cochlear implant, is a bionic. That means it's interface between the brain in some sense. And she realised that people were sitting all over the place trying to do that with their other senses: eyes, heart, lung, liver, limbs. And so they didn't know where to go, but she's already been that place. So she put them together. She started up 7 years ago when she knew she's going to retire from here and say, and started up another charity where she gets all these people who are making up new eyes, new hearts, new lungs, livers, and gives them a place to go. She gets them with developers. She has a great big contest every year to get the best ones and take them overseas so they learn more. So she's still very happily and busily engaged with her life, as I am. So we don't quite know where it's going to stop. We just keep on going till we hit a wall somewhere.
Peter, what would you say has been your most out on the limb decision, and what was the outcome of that decision?
I actually answered that question too, if you asked me. I don't know that I wrote it down, but the decisions we were simply because I was working with a group of doctors when I first started practice, and physios were still very much reliant on a doctor's referral to do anything. After 10 years, I decided I needed to break away from doctors. I needed to do a physio thing, a Peter Dornan thing. So I moved away and started up my own practice miles away from them. And as you said, there was miles away from many other physios. So that was a big out in the limb thing I did, because I had a whole lot of patients over there, but they all followed me across, and I built from there. So I didn't lose one. So that was out in the limb thing. So I guess that was it. But I guess the other out in the limb thing was always, going to climb mountains of any sort, and that's hardly out in the limb. Anyone who climbs mountains takes a lot. There are risks involved, but you take a great deal of care to try and minimise the risks with the right guides, the right training, the right equipment. So you do take a risk, but I never considered I was out in the limb there, because I always thought I could cope with the risk. Everyone said that people die every day climbing mountains, but I don't know. I don't know that I probably have much more to say than that.
Yeah. Okay. If you could step back to your younger self, would there be any pieces of advice that you'd pass on, knowing what you now know?
I thought about that one too, and I said, Peter Dornan, be bold, be innovative, try new things. Don't be frightened to try something new. That's when I was brand new and scared stiff of my profession, scared stiff of who I was, because we had a very, very little education, except about a very small passive life as a physio. But I would have said, be brave to try anything. That doesn't matter if you fall over, pick yourself up. All you can do is break something, and you get up and you start again. That's the first thing I would have said. And then I said, never listen to people who go tut tut. Never do that. Only listen to people who are positive. Never go into a negative circle of friends. Only pick people who want to challenge themselves, who want to keep on building, who want to keep on changing the world, and who only see the world in a positive fashion. And the third one was, be confident to exercise for an hour a day. It will maintain you through your whole life, because at that stage of the game, people didn't exercise past about 30 or 40. But I would have said to myself, because I would exercise an hour a day when I was that age, easily, probably more. But what we know now is that as you get older and you lose about 1% of your strength from when you're 30, 35, by the time you get to 60, you've lost 30% of your strength. So I would have told myself to keep on with weights, keep on with running, keep on with swimming, keep on with punching, keep on with doing at least an hour a day every day of your life, at least 5 days a week. And don't get to a certain age and think, well, don't let anyone say, well, you're a certain age now, you should slow down a bit. You should sit in a rocking chair, or you should see less patients, or you should do something less. And so that's what I would have said. I said, don't listen to anyone except your own heart.
Yeah. Looking forward, where would you like to see the profession of physiotherapy heading?
I wrote down a couple of notes about that too, because I did listen to what you said. Certainly, the allied health professions, the person will, hang on, I can't read out your writing down, but I'd like to see us on an equal basis with every medical person, every allied health profession, and this is what we're doing now at the APA level. We're going out to meeting all the different institutions and people to let them know what physio can do. I'd like to see us on equal footing with every other allied health and every other medical professional, so we treated as equals everywhere we go, both financially but also with status. And I don't think there's much more I would say about that, except that we've got to keep on going for it. Yeah.
Do you think there are particular ways that could be achieved that's not sort of being addressed from your experience?
I think the APA is doing a very good job with it right now. I think they're going out. I think my friend Scott Willis is really pushing, but I think every other president has for a long time. Our whole aim has been to upgrade the profession. I don't know that I could offer a lot more to it, except for individuals to upgrade their personal act. the more individuals have raising our own standard, the more the profession will stay and will raise also.
Yeah.
In other words, keep learning, keep studying, never ever stop studying. Keep going hitting those books, keep hitting jolly Twitter to learn from them wherever. I use Twitter very well. I've got a whole group of professional friends only. I get rid of the idiots, and practically every new thing that I learn often comes from someone in the States or in Australia or in the UK, and they've got a new idea. So I use that as a gem. I get gems from everybody, and I sprinkle them on my patients. I get a lot of gems from Twitter. I get rid of the idiots.
And where do you see Peter Dornan being in 3 to 5 years' time professionally? What is it you're wanting to do or achieve the next few years?
Well, the first thing is I like to stay alive. I say that not lightly, because the people in my demographic are retiring, they're dying, and they're often getting dementia. Dementia is a big thing for a lot of my age group in their 80s. So the first thing is I want to stay alive. I'd still like to be in practice. I imagine I'm going to be in practice for a few more years yet. Keeping in mind the demographic means tomorrow something could fall off, and it might all be stopped tomorrow. So I've got that as plan B. Something falls off, I'll retire or die or whatever the thumb coming out of heaven does for me. But the main thing is I'll be focusing on pelvic pain, because that's what I do all day, every day, and I know I can make a difference with that. I make a big difference with a lot of people who've had these things for years and years, and I can make a difference. So if you've got any influence yourself with musculoskeletal, and I know what your background is, you can convince them to have a good look at the sacroiliac joint, and someone comes in with any symptom of pelvic pain, and that's anywhere where the epidermal nerve goes, tell them to just really start studying it. We need a lot more people doing that. So that's where I hope to be in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time. I don't know. I think I'll get a tap on the shoulder from somebody somewhere at the right time.
Brilliant. Hey, Pete, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your insights. And thank you also on behalf of the physios that I know for being such a pioneer and planting the flag in so many areas within our profession, and, blazing a pathway, because you've certainly been a unique person, and it's been brilliant to sort of get a bit more insight as to what you have done and what motivated you to get there. So thanks heaps from all of us on Physio+10.
Thank you, but I've got one more thing to say, which I didn't. I couldn't read my writing. It was simply that personally, I have an unbreakable bond with my partner. I will continue to have a cocktail hour with her every day and share adventures every day. That's one thing I must tell everybody. If you want to know, we have a cocktail hour every night of our life, and we have always done that. So we talk about what we've done with our life that day, who we met and who might influence us, and then we plan the next day. So we have an unbreakable bond, so we know what each other's doing. So that's probably will finish off what I'm going to say to you. Thank you.
Well, I'll raise a glass to you and Dimity, and hope you have a fantastic cocktail evening tonight.
Yeah, we will be. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I sing, love me tender, love me true, never let me go. You have made my life complete, and I love you so. Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams come true.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Physio+10, in which I trust you gained some valuable insights. It'd be awesome if you could leave your 2 cents worth as a review or rating of this podcast, and I look forward to sharing the story of another trailblazing physiotherapist with you in 2 weeks' time. Stay safe. Bye for now.